Spears, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Scott Spears Now. Today we're going to have a whole lot of fun because we're going to talk to a true Chicago broadcasting icon, Art Hellyer. Art Hellyer has been broadcasting in Chicago for more years at more stations than anybody can remember, and doing it very successfully. This interview we're going to have with Art felt much more like a conversation than anything else. Let's get right to it. A very interesting man in his 9th decade. Broadcasting legend, Art Hellyer. This is Scott Spears, and today we're going to take a look back at the golden age of radio with the subject of a great documentary, Wake Up Chicago, the Art Hellyer story. I'm so glad to be joined by Art Hellyer. Art, how are you?
I'm just fine, Scott, and how are you?
Very good. We had a nice little conversation before we came on the air about the inner workings of this broadcasting business.
Mm-hmm. We surely did.
Yeah. Why is broadcasting so fascinating to you?
Well, when I was in World War II, I went down to KOB in Albuquerque, where I was stationed for part of the war. And I went to, KOB was a 50,000 watt NBC station, mind you, as powerful as they can get, you know. And I took an audition, and they hired me. And they first of all, they wanted to know my background. I told them I had done children's programs on the radio in Chicago, and that was a lie. But that's for most of us, I think, is the way we started, with a lie here or there. And I don't hear you. Are you still there, Scott?
I am still here.
Okay, good. And so I worked on Albuquerque. I was known as Albuquerque Art, believe it or not, on KOB. Did a country western show, played my guitar, sang songs, and played country western music. And so I actually got to get on the air while I was still in uniform. And then when I came home from the Army on February 18th, 1946, my mom told me about an ad she had seen in the Chicago Tribune for a radio school, Radio Institute of Chicago at 165 North Michigan Avenue. So I went down there one day, and they enrolled me, and I took some courses. And around the 6-month period, around Christmas time that year, I was called in by the chief announcer at WBBM, and Paul Barnes, another announcer, who were instructors of mine, and they both said, "We know a man in Charleston, West Virginia, who's putting a station on the air a week from now, New Year's Eve, and 1947. We want you to be down there, and he's going to build his staff around you." And so I was on a train for Charleston, West Virginia on New Year's Eve of 1946, and I signed on the station at 5 o'clock in the morning and kicked it all off there, and I was on my way. It was my mom telling me about that ad in the paper, really, in the Tribune, that got me started, Scott.
You say you went to a broadcasting school. Do you believe, in hindsight now, that broadcasting can be taught?
No.
Why is that?
No, I don't believe, and I've taught at 2 colleges in Chicago, Columbia College and St. Francis University. I spent years, I taught there also while I was still on the air all the time, you know. And I believe that you can, I have many students, former students of mine on the air right in Chicago now. And one of them's with ESPN, and where's it, Danbury, Connecticut, and so on and so forth. But what I would do is just sit and have a nightly 3-hour chat with them about radio, about my career and what I knew about it, and they'd ask me questions, and I'd tell them how you'd work this and that, and I had a control room. I taught them how to run a turntable in those days that had 33 in the third, 45, and 78 RPM on it. RCA Victor turntable and taught them how to speak into a microphone and taught them how to write commercials and then read them. So, yeah, I guess in a way, I didn't instruct them. But when it comes down to it, when you go to a station, I don't know. It's up to management, and if for people who read my book, they know what I think of most managers in radio. I think they're most of them are a bunch of dumbbells who have no idea what they're doing, Scott.
What is your main reasoning for that?
My main reasoning for that?
Yeah.
Is that so many of them knew nothing about radio. They were outsiders who had the money to buy a radio station, and then they just came in there and would manage it and completely mismanage it because they understood nothing about radio. They were former car dealers or pharmacy owners or things like that, you know, made some big money and bought a radio station.
When you sat down behind the mic for the first time and you were at the helm of your own show, where did your style come from?
Well, I was just myself. I've always been just myself. And people over the years and write-ups about me and newspapers and magazines and so on and so forth always said that they felt that I was talking only to them, the one person, Scott.
So if you went on the air that morning and you had such and such things to get done, so many commercials to read, what thinking went into that the night before or before the show as far as ideas for what you were going to say?
Truthfully, nothing, because I had been studying at Radio Institute of Chicago. When I came home from the Army, my mom had seen an ad for Radio Institute of Chicago in the Chicago Tribune, and I went down to their studio setup on Michigan Boulevard in Chicago, 165 North Michigan, and I enrolled under the GI Bill, so it was paid for by the government. And I was there for the fall semester, and just before Christmas time, Paul Barnes said to me, the chief announcer at the school and the best announcer in Chicago, and I'd say he was the best of all time in Chicago, my major instructor there, he said, "Get out of here. Don't stay here for the 2 or 4 year course. Get out and start working." He said, "There's a station a friend of mine is opening, Bob Province, down in Charleston, West Virginia. I want you down there New Year's Eve to sign on with them for the first time, station going on the air, New Year's Day of 1947. So I took the train down, and I stayed. They had a room for me at the hotel, and the station happened to be in the hotel there too. And I had a rough time sleeping. I had maybe an hour or two. I was going on the air for the first time. So I did no planning whatsoever, none whatsoever. I was frankly scared stiff, Scott, during the night.
So when you got to the microphone that morning, what happened?
Okay, I'll tell you. When I came into the station, came down in the elevator. It's the only time I ever went to work on an elevator, by the way. Living there, lived in the building. The first thing I noted or did was go to the 2 news machines. UPI and AP each had a news machine in those days, running 24 hours a day. Only these were turned off. They weren't running. So I went down to the all-night drugstore, which had a little lunchroom in it, too, in the hotel. And I bought the Charleston newspaper for New Year's Day, 1947. And I started out at 5 to 5:15 in the morning, a 15-minute newscast. Art Hellyer with you, the red-headed announcer. I'm new to Charleston. I hope we'll all get to know each other over the years ahead, and I hope you enjoy my work here. And now it's time for the news. And I read it from the paper. And at 5:15, about 5:11, I started to smell booze, and this was the getting over the all-night drunk they were on. The hillbillies who were coming in, they were known as Slim Dry and the Carolina Hillbillies. I was told they would follow me 5:45 to 6. And they came in and the bass fiddle banged against the door and everything. So I explained the guys were coming to work to follow me. And I put them on the air, and I turned the news machines on at that time while they were doing their show and everything. And 6 o'clock I came back in and continued from there. And by the way, I called the manager, Jack Gelder. Actually, Jack Gelder called me that day, the manager, to welcome me on New Year's Day, 1947. He said, "How's everything going?" And I said, "Well, the first thing was the news machines were both turned off." He said, "Holy smoke, well, you know, we had a party there last night, the mayor and everybody there welcoming us to Charleston, going on, because I signed the station on for the first time ever." And he said he'd check on it. Well, he got in touch with Waverly Graverly, who was the maintenance man. And Mr. Waverly Graverly told him he had turned off the machines because, quote, "somebody went home and left them on." How do you like that?
That's the way it goes sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, so that was my very first start.
When you got behind the microphone and it was no longer a newscast where you were reading something, what did you think, this is what I'm going to do? This is what I'm going to talk to people, I'm going to take calls, I'm going to interview. Did you think at all about just the style of the whole thing?
Well, from the very beginning, I've always ad-libbed all my commercials, and over the years, as they went by, it was always understood with the sponsors, just and I used to go out and meet each sponsor too. And they'd say, "Well, give Art some notes and he'll work around that and just ad-lib." And I've always ad-libbed the commercials. And I started doing that the very first morning there in Charleston, West Virginia. And everything has always been spontaneous with me.
Do people make the broadcasting business harder than it is?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, some people make it much harder than it is. And actually, for me, the easiest thing in the world is doing what you and I are doing right now, just sitting down, and I'm not even aware the mic is there, Scott.
It's basically conversation. If you can get people to believe that you are just having a conversation, which you are, you know, that's Zen. That's perfect.
Give me a subject for a commercial.
Dish soap. Dish soap.
Dish soap.
Yes.
Hi, folks. Art Hellyer talking to you about Morris's dish soap. I tell you, I wondered about it when I first heard about it because, you know, I've heard of all the major brands. Who the heck is Morris? So I checked it out by buying a bar of it and the box of it, also the flakes. And took it home, tried it out, and I have never in my life experienced such a joyful experience as I have with this marvelous soap that they turn out for us. The bars are only 33 cents each, and you can get a 16-ounce box of it for $4.95 in any store across the land now. And I recommend it ever so highly, and I'd advise you when you go into the store today, just ask for it and tell them Art Hellyer sent you. Thank you.
Now, when you do something like that, when it was an actual sponsor on an actual broadcast, if you had never used the product, could you pitch it fully with no guilt?
Yeah. Yeah, because I always, from the very beginning, I told the sales department, I'd meet with them first, you know, and tell them I want only legitimate clients on this show. I don't want anybody who's anything but a legitimate client, and I can say so when I talk on the air about them. Yeah.
When I was watching your documentary, Art, there seemed to be two themes that I picked up, and maybe they were just me. But one was that this broadcasting business is driven to a certain degree by money. And the announcer, broadcaster, disc jockey, whatever you call them, a lot of times does not make a lot of money.
Oh, that's very true.
How big a part of what you did, because you loved it, it's easy to see that, and you were a natural at it, did money play in?
Money didn't play any role until Elaine and I were married the following year, and then the following year after that we had our first youngster, and I realized that living on $17 a week is very, very difficult. And so I asked them to set up fees for me for the commercials and so on and so forth, so I could make like $30 a week, believe it or not, back in those days, Scott. And money's very important, but to me, the first thing is being on the air and having people listen to you and being absolutely honest and genuine with them. And again, speaking to that one person who's out there, and many times I used to say there was only one person listening to me.
Did you ever make a decision in your career that was based on money or something else that now looking back you wish you had not?
Oh, gosh. I wish I had never gone out on State Street in Chicago on New Year's Eve, 1965.
Tell that story. I don't know if most people know that.
Okay, you saw what
I did.
The problem I had there on the documentary. I was on duty at Channel 7, ABC. I worked, for years. Everybody in the country heard me on all the system cues and announcements on all of ABC TV shows, because we did them all out of Chicago, which was the flagship station for many, many years for ABC television. And I don't know, they told me I'd be out in State Street that night, and I said, okay, that's fine. So I went out there, and the crowd was very unruly. The police estimated about 200,000 people. I don't know who does that estimation for them, but about 200,000 people, and I was under the marquee of the State Lake Theater, which is right across the street from the Chicago Theater, on State Street, that great street, and the main street in downtown Loop, Chicago, you know. And I kept telling them, we're not on yet, telling the crowd, we're not on yet, would you please stop shoving and all that sort of thing. But when I did come on, I was talking, and I saw it later on film, and you saw it on film too, on my documentary, the very film I saw afterward. A man, well-dressed, and he had a white shirt, tie, and dressed with an overcoat on a cold night, threw a punch into my upper left back and herniated 2 discs. I wasn't aware of it at the time. And then I fell down into State Street, and I'll tell you, Scott, I never stopped talking. I kept on talking. Fell down into State Street, and someone gave me a knee in the lower back and herniated 2 more discs. I didn't know it at the time. And I ended up backwards in the middle of State Street over the hood of a Corvette. And that's where I ended my broadcast and still kept talking all the way. And that was on Coast to Coast. And then the next afternoon, ABC replayed that on the 6 o'clock news. You saw the 6 o'clock news replay there. And what can happen to an announcer on New Year's Eve with a tremendously large crowd, you know. And ever since then, many, many, many people now work above the crowds, some floors up or on a fire escape or something, just to be above them. I notice that sometimes, Scott.
You know, it's interesting. Obviously, if you could do that again, you wouldn't go down there.
No, I wouldn't do it if I had known, because even now I have pain there as I'm talking to you all these years later, and every week I have therapy every Thursday still.
Obviously, as I say, you wouldn't do it again. That night before it happened, knowing the unruliness of the crowd, did you have trepidation?
Not really, no.
Yeah.
No, I did not.
For the most part, and this is really kind of the tragedy of the story, of the documentary, I felt, it really took down you at the height of your broadcasting career. Mm-hmm. And you were a fairly young man then.
Mm-hmm. Right. I was slowed down appreciably.
How did that impact you, not being able to go in front of the mic anymore? And by all accounts, you were a top-notch guy. You were in a big market. You probably would have gone on to big things had you stayed consistent.
Well, I was #1 in Chicago 4 different times on 4 different stations and 4 different decades. So that was really in the second decade of my career, and I was on the air well into the 90s and early 2000s, and I was on I did shows on the internet just very recently.
Is it different?
Is it different? For me, no. No. All the people are the same, they just have different names.
Do you think about how many people are listening?
No, I've never given that any thought. I honestly think of it as being one person.
When you say #1, 4 decades, 4 stations, what allowed that in your opinion?
What allowed it?
Yeah. Was it good promotion? Was it a good show? Was it notoriety? What made that possible?
I had a large following. I was #1 in Chicago in the early 50s, right off the bat, early in my career in Chicago. And people would tell other people, I'd be on elevators in the Loop, and I'd hear people talking about my show. I'd be walking up Michigan Boulevard. I'd hear people talking, hey, did you hear Art Hellyer this morning? That sort of thing. Everything just evolved with me.
It's interesting, again, Art, that when I'm watching the documentary, what you were doing in the early days of broadcasting was, I don't want to say it was shock jock, because that's become a whole different thing in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. But you were doing things people didn't do. What are some of your memories of that, and why did you do that?
Well, first of all, I was outliving everything. And things would come to mind. I'd just say them. And my commercials never ran 60 seconds except on TV. And on TV, they had to be 10, 20, 30, 45, 55, or 60. And on TV, and network TV especially, when I was on ABC Network all those years, those had to be exactly to the thousandths of a second, as you know. But on my own shows, I often ran 2-3 minutes with commercials. And the salespeople were told to say that Art Hellyer will run until he's through talking about you. But never less than the 30 or 60 seconds they would pay for, you know.
Why were you, through all those years, going from station to station?
I'm in my studio here. Oh, for heaven's sake. Well, just stay with me while I answer my phone.
I will.
Okay, keep it rolling. Hello. Well, Dave, first of all, I want to know how my brother is. Yeah, but I want to tell you something else. I'm being interviewed on a radio show right now as you and I are talking. Yeah, would you call me back later? Oh, about an hour. Okay. All right, but is Dick okay? Okay, fine. Thank you. Okay, thank you. That's a little personal thing there.
Yeah,
my brother was rushed to the hospital with pneumonia yesterday.
Gosh, well, we hope everything's okay.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Where did we leave off here?
We left off.
When we were so rudely interrupted.
Things happen. Things happen.
Anamici's invention. Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you, one time I was interviewing, I'll name drop now. I was interviewing Larry King one time on radio.
Oh, boy, does you got a word in?
Well, I can see why he was effective. And he's doing the interview on the telephone from his house while a playoff game is on. And the team, I can't remember the team, but they scored the winning touchdown while we were on the phone, and you could hear his kids in the background jump up and cheering. And he stopped and did just what you did. He said, just hold on, this is real life.
Yeah, right.
What can you do?
That's the way I've always done my shows. It's real life, sure. And by the way, I admire him very much.
There's something about him, I think it's a minimalist idea. I used to love his radio show, though. 5 hours overnight.
Yeah.
Takes a lot to be on for 5 hours, talk radio.
He's an unusual man. He was married 7 times.
So he had a lot to talk about.
or run away from.
I want to run down, because some broadcasters, one who I've been doing a lot of studying on as of late, who I really think maybe people don't, I don't want to say they don't remember him because he's still around, but what he did socially was never done, and I don't think could be done now, and that's Phil Donahue. Mm-hmm. When I think he had a homosexual on, he had atheist on, he had all these in the 1960s on television. I don't think you could do that today.
No. But he did, and by the way, he was a very close friend of my Dr. K. And when Dr. K was so ill and dying, he came to Dr. K's house many times to just sit and do anything he could for him.
Is that right?
He's an awfully nice man.
Shows his character.
Mm-hmm.
And I recently read that he was on the ground protesting the opening of the George W. Bush Library.
Mm-hmm.
Still at it.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Yeah, he has to be in his 80s.
Pretty close to it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Art, what I was saying before we went to the phone call there was for 4 decades, 4 different stations. Did you ever have loyalty to one particular station in your career?
I was a freelancer, primarily. And when we freelance, there's not much of that done anymore. But we had, maybe 10, 12 announcers in Chicago, all freelancing. And that is, you could work on 5, 6, 7 stations at a time. I covered that in the book, too. I even have it laid out in the book how I got from one station to another and managed to be on 7 stations at a time, Scott. I don't know. You just go along with everything, I guess.
When it comes to doing a broadcast in 2013, if somebody came to you today and said, we want you on the air 5 days a week, 3 hours a morning, would you take the job?
Out of my home, yeah. I'm sitting in a completely equipped studio right in my home here. Out of my home, but I'll tell you this. On September 24th, 1982, I took a vow on WJJD, station I was on a Saturday night, that I would never come to downtown Loop, Chicago again in my lifetime. and I have not been back. And I announced that I said for Channel 7, the folks over there who've been so good to me at ABC TV for over 30 years, this is my 2-week notice. To Columbia College, where I've been teaching for over 10 years, this is my notice. Tonight is my last night in the loop. And that was it.
What caused that?
Well, first of all, my back, it was a real problem driving. I live 40 miles out from the loop, an 80-mile round trip every day. And sometimes I would go in 2-3 times a day. And my back couldn't take it anymore. And the parking became absolutely impossible in the loop. I've been held up at gunpoint 3 different times in the underground parking garage in the loop in Chicago. And I was just sick and tired of sometimes being in the car 2 to 2.5 hours each way just to work my way back and forth. I just threw in the sponge.
Being that you have had this internet radio show and you have worked for many radio stations, why did you leave those jobs? Why didn't you just keep on keeping on?
Well, they don't pay you 1 penny at internet, and I couldn't afford to do it anymore. But when I came out of the loop, a man named Ralph Sherman, one of the people I mentioned in my book as the 5 really great managers I've ever worked for, really great managers, he called me and he said, I want you to come out to the satellite network tomorrow. I want you to see it, see if you'll come to work with us. Well, I went out there and I went to work at the satellite network. That was in 1981, and I worked there until 87. And I don't know if you're familiar with the original satellite network. We broadcast off the Hughes Galaxy 2 satellite, which is 32,000 miles in space. And every city, every station we were on, the people thought we were right in that city because we recorded all of the 5, 10, 15, 20, and 30-second announcements for them, and then pushing certain colored buttons as we would do the shows, our own shows, 4-hour shows daily. We would bring all their breaks and everything in and local announcements and all, and people honestly would come down to the station with records for me in Tallahassee, Florida, in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm not kidding you, it happened.
You know, that's a big discussion. In the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and I'm even going to say into the 70s, people felt that radio was local. Mm-hmm. It was local as could be. We talked about him in this interview. Larry King goes on the Mutual Network in, I believe, the late 70s. National Talk Radio.
The largest network, too, at the time.
Absolutely. And it works. Rush Limbaugh works. Sean Hannity works. Is radio local, or is the world much smaller now?
Oh, the world is tremendously smaller, and the jets did that. The jet airplanes made it so small.
If you're on the air in Chicago or Ohio or Indiana, do you have to talk about what's going on in the 30-mile radius of where you live to survive?
Oh, yes, you have to do that if you're on a local station, because the stations, you know, and I used to teach management too at Columbia College, the stations, when you are licensed, one of the first things that you agree to is you're going to serve that local community.
I agree on that point. I guess what I'm saying is if you come to do a show, and obviously the station is doing local and they're selling in the local market.
Right.
Do you have to be local? Do you have to be your show focused on bake sales and school events, or can you do national things?
Well, you can do national commercials. Commercials represent the national clients like Ford and that sort of thing, Chevrolet. But you've got to talk about the local bake sales and the women's get-togethers and the all the local clubs and everything. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, I found something interesting in broadcasting in the last few years, and that is, maybe the last 10 years, and that is the person who's listening to you. And radio usually has an older audience, which I'm sure
Right.
you know.
Right.
If that person is listening to you, and they're listening to you every day, and there's a big story on CNN the night before, and you come in the next morning and you do a show on that, or you try to get that person who the story's about, whether they're in another state or not,
Right.
that works because that person saw CNN the night before. They know what's going on.
Exactly.
And I think that changed radio a lot from where it always had to be bake sales and reading the local paper.
But you still have to do that too.
Yeah, I think it has to be a mix.
Sure. But as you said, oh yes, I talked about things that happened completely out of from where I was working frequently. Sure.
You know, one thing I found that worked, and I stumbled upon this by accident, was gathering local people to talk about national events.
Mm-hmm.
That works very well.
A forum.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's one of the most fascinating discoveries I think I've found in radio.
Now tell me about your show.
My show is total talk, but with no agenda, no well, we do politics, but we are not Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, any of that.
Thank heaven.
And it's interesting, I think, and I get your opinion on this. Every national syndicated radio show today, you'd be hard-pressed to find one, has a theme. Most of them are political. But even the ones that aren't political, like George Norrie, their theme is science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody does the Arthur Godfrey, or the Larry King, or the Phil Donahue. Just, you almost have to have, it has to be driven by you more than the guest. A lot of people like the guest.
True.
What's the reason behind that, in your opinion?
Well, the whole thing, as you said a few minutes ago, has changed. It isn't the way it is back in the 1950s or 60s by any means. And frankly, I still do them the other way. And I prefer radio done the way I've always done my shows. And just a relaxed little get-together with one person. Yeah.
Why do station owners and syndicators feel that can't work nationally anymore?
Because they're nuts.
There you go. Are they naive to the business, or?
Most of them are.
Yeah.
Most of them are. There are unusual ones like this great Ralph Sherman I worked for. And just a few more that I've worked for over the years, believe me. Good station managers are very, very hard to find, believe me.
Let me pose this to you, Art. Because obviously you've still got it, you've got the voice, the talent, and have been very popular.
Thank you.
If today a syndicator came to you and said, we want to take what you do and make it national, would the salespeople for that syndicate be able to sell you to the stations?
Yeah, they would be able to sell me to the stations because, again, I would go in there and do my show as I've always done it. But today it would be mostly, again, with full country sponsors, products that are available throughout the entire country, not just in one local town.
Because what we've talked about, would you rate against a Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, George Norrie?
Well, I would, for one reason. My show wouldn't be anything like theirs, and when it comes to politics, I have always been right down the middle. I have voted voted probably for just as many Republicans as I have Democrats. I admire, for example, as presidents Harry Truman, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, General Eisenhower, Bill Clinton, let's see, George Bush Sr., admire very much, and so on and so forth. And I've always voted as an independent voter. Yeah, and I would never stick my neck out one side or the other. Boy, if you're not ultra-conservative, you're not a Limbaugh person.
So that being said, Art, I think it comes back to this. It is easy to say that the syndicators and the station owners are naive or don't know the business.
Much.
But when it comes to that, why don't they try it? Because my theory was, if I'm totally naive to the business, and we've got 10 politically oriented syndicated talk shows, we've got 5 sci-fi oriented talk shows, we've got 10 sports oriented, nobody, I can't think of one name, and if you can, shout it out there, who does a talk show where the guest is the focus. That would be different.
Well, I don't know. In Chicago, we still have, and our major radio station is WGN, as you know. That's all talk, and it's done very well, and they don't just categorize it as you said, Scott. They cover everything.
Is there a national syndicated, just flat talk show? I can't think of one.
Oh, well, do you want to take TV shows?
Well, TV shows, I think, are there any?
What about Letterman?
Letterman, I think, is a comedy show. I don't think the guest is the focus.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it is?
I think Letterman and the guest are the focus.
Well, I wouldn't say...
and he's very spontaneous. I love that about him.
Oh, Letterman I prefer far over Leno.
Oh, I do too.
And I think he's a far better interviewer than Leno is.
Yes, he is.
But I'm saying, I'm not sure that Letterman is the focus of his show. I think comedy is.
Mm-hmm.
So I would consider that a comedy show. When I'm thinking of a talk show, I'm thinking like the Arthur Godfreys, the Larry Kings, where there was no band, no couch.
Wait a minute, Arthur Godfrey had a wonderful band and vocalists.
And that's one of the founding reasons he ended up bad in the end, when he yelled at the band leader and people found out.
No, it wasn't the band leader. It was the vocalist who had gone off to the Navy. I had him on the air, and I have his statement here in his own handwriting, and I can't think of his name at the moment. But the vocalist went off to the Army in 53 or 54 and served a couple of years, and then came back, and then he put out his own record with Archie Blair and his orchestra. Archie Blair being the band leader on the Godfrey show. And do you know exactly how he did that?
No, I don't.
He back-timed, you know, when he ended the show, the hour show, he would always end his Arthur Godfrey, God bless you all, and that sort of thing. And this is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System. He had that all back-timed nicely. And when he introduced the vocalist just back from the Navy, and he was with us all these years, and that's wonderful. When the vocalist finished the song, he said, and by the way, that was his last appearance on the Godfrey show. He's no longer one of the little Godfreys because he went out and made recordings without our permission here. This is Arthur Godfrey, God bless you, and this is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
And that was the end of him, virtually.
Yeah, that was the end.
Yeah, people found out he wasn't Uncle Art.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah. Well, you know, when you had the gentleman on your show.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Did he like Arthur Godfrey?
Oh, yeah. For a time he did, but he admired him too. Yeah. Yeah.
Did he feel bad about sort of inadvertently ruining his career?
Well, I even asked him on the air, would you do that again, go out and make your recordings? He said, oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So there you go.
Right.
Art, I'll tell you who I consider when I'm getting into this, because this has kind of turned into an interesting conversation on what is talk. I'll tell you two guys who I would consider a talk show, and neither one, but they're both gone now.
Right.
Jack Parr, Tom Snyder.
Oh, my. Tom Snyder's Milwaukee.
To me, that's a talk show.
And Jack Parr. I didn't know you were familiar with Jack Parr.
I wasn't alive in those days, but I'm fascinated by Jack Parr.
Well, he had the Tonight Show before Carson, and he was one of my idols.
Had to be.
And so was Snyder.
To me, those shows, even though Parr had a band, those were talk shows. They weren't trying to be funny. They weren't scripted. They weren't...
Not scripted at all.
No. To me, that's the difference between... And I like Letterman, but that's the difference between Letterman and a talk show to me. Snyder, Parr. Where are those shows today? What we're doing here. Nobody's lighting off rockets. No band is playing.
No.
Nobody's telling jokes. Why don't these shows exist nationally?
Because managers are afraid to have them.
Why?
Because they don't think the audience wants any of that stuff anymore. And I think they're wrong.
I do too. And I think those two gentlemen, unfortunately, because of being gone and the time passing, are kind of underrated.
Oh, yes, definitely. Well, I'll tell you another thing. It's like the other night, I was listening to WGN in Chicago, all-night show, and they asked for people to call in with their memories of the biggest sports events in Chicago. This was to tie in with the fact that the Blackhawks had won the Stanley Cup. And what do you remember as the greatest sports event in Chicago history? Well, I phoned in with December 8th, 1940. And I said to the MC, the host, do you have any idea what I'm going to talk about? He said, no, I don't. And by the way, the guy gave me a great intro. It was very nice and close. But he said, I really don't know, Art, what December 8th, 1940 was. I said, well, the Chicago Bears played the Washington Redskins for the National Football League title. This was before the Super Bowl. And Super Bowl, pardon me. And I said, Bill Osmanski, the fullback, went off tackle on the second play of scrimmage with Irv Kupcinet. And by the way, Irv Kupcinet was a great writer in Chicago later. But Irv Kupcinet was the one of the officials that afternoon in that ball game. And Irv Kupcinet followed him down the field 66 yards to make sure he didn't step out. And that was the first touchdown that afternoon, and a score that ended up 73-0 in a championship game. And I said, first of all, that's the number one, and I would rank the great things that the Blackhawks did, winning it in 34, in 1938 with a goalie who had his toe broken. They found a drunk goalie to play for him up in Toronto. And then the 61, 2010, 2013, just a week or so ago, you know. Yeah, those were the best sports events in Chicago's history, in my opinion, you know. But it was nice to be able to talk about stuff like that. But people who called in afterward were so pleased that Art Hellyer called in with that memory because they never heard about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what I'm getting at. Jack Parr, Tom Snyder, are in that same position as the Chicago Bears in 1940.
Well, and you know, Art,
people today, the names mean nothing.
well, and it's interesting, Art, because one thing that I think we all find in broadcasting, anybody who does a substantial interview, not a news interview that's 2 minutes with a lady on the street, but a substantial interview, I think it's even better than print. Because print can misquote you, print can quote you out of context. When it's in your own words,
Yeah, right.
and right now, you know, that means something, I think.
And you have it recorded too.
Yes, you do. And you can, and you know, that's something I learned too, which I'm sure you've had this come up many times. So many people who've been on my program, who've done extensive interviews, are dead now.
Yeah,
You know, and to pop them in and listen.
that's great.
That's a great, the one, you know, I was lucky enough to do the last interview with Phyllis Diller.
Really?
Yeah, we struck up a great relationship early in my career.
Oh, nice.
She was on, I don't know, 20, 30 times, doing all kinds of stuff. And 1 month before she died, I think to the day, she came on and did an interview, and it was at 95 Classic.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, you see, she was a pro.
She really was.
Absolute professional.
Well, I'll tell you about that if you don't mind a story here.
Right.
Because that to me was a substantial interview for this reason. And I've told this story before, but it means something because at the time I couldn't say this. But because Phyllis had been on the show so many times, I had a relationship. I didn't go through an agent. I called her home.
Sure.
And in the beginning, it was last year, beginning of 2012, I called up to do an interview with her like I had always done. And I got a secretary, and the secretary she wasn't putting me off in a mean way, but it was just, she's not available, now she's not available. And eventually I think the secretary caught on to, we need to say something here more than this, but we don't want to leak anything to the media. So they put me on with her son, private conversation, but basically ipso facto was that Phyllis had suffered a small stroke. And she wasn't really feeling up to do interviews, which I was fine with. So 6 months passed and we didn't do anything with it. Well, she turned 95 in July. Her birthday was in July. So I called up the house just to say, if she's feeling up to it, I can tape it in case there's any problem. I'd love to have her on.
Sure.
The son okayed it. She came on, and then I got, right before we did it, I got a little worried because I thought, she's had a stroke, she's 95, this might not be good, just from the standpoint, I don't want to diminish her in any way.
That's very nice.
Yeah, so she came on, and within 5 minutes, same Phyllis. And we got to the end, and this is the lasting memory of the whole thing. We got to the end, and I said, Phyllis, at 95, are you fearful of death? And she said, no. She said, not at all. She said, when you die, that's it. You go in the ground, that's all. And you're done. And I said, so Phyllis, I said, you don't believe in heaven, hell, anything? She said, no.
Purgatory.
Purgatory? She said, no, absolutely not. She said, you go black and that's it. I said, okay. I said, but Phyllis, about 6 months ago, I saw you on A&E's Celebrity Ghost Story. I said, so you believe in ghosts, but you don't believe in a heaven or a hell? And she said, well, for the money they paid me, I did temporarily. And I thought, there it is. The mind's still working.
Yeah, sharp.
Yeah, at
Really
95.
sharp. Who else have you interviewed?
You know, a lot of people, some of my favorites are Dick Cavett.
Oh, yeah.
He's sharp. Boy, is he sharp.
He had a great late night show, you know.
He really did, and he's a great conversationalist.
Oh, yes, he is.
Ed Asner's one of my favorites because he's
a good guy.
he is not what not that you'd expect anything bad, but he gets on and wants to talk about politics.
Oh, yeah.
He's a great guy. I like him a lot.
Yeah.
I like Marla Gibbs has been on a lot.
Okay.
I like her. I like, who has been on? I'm trying to think. I did the last interview with Don Ho also.
Really?
Yeah, from Hawaii.
Yeah, all right.
Famous Amos. Wally Amos was very good.
Did Don Ho talk about when he was on a show called Hawaii Calls?
No.
That was a half hour every Saturday night from 6:30 to 7, before television even came along, on radio only. And it was one of my favorite shows. Don Ho was the vocalist on it.
Have you ever felt fearful during an interview, Art?
Yeah. Back years ago, you and I were talking about this earlier, about words that couldn't be used on the air and all. Well, in the beginning, I had been warned from my very first jobs, never must the words H-E-L-L or D-A-M-N ever be said, they must never be said on the air. And my fear, this was my fear now, Scott, that I would be interviewing some person who would use one of those words and I'd get fired.
Mm. You know, and isn't it strange that in live broadcasting, they put that on the host, as if you could stop somebody?
Right.
What are you going to do? I've never heard the answer to how you stop somebody from doing that.
And back when I was first doing interviews and all, there was no 7-second delay, of course.
Well, you know, I worked with a guy for years who did sports who said he would be in such shock from the person saying it would take 7 seconds to hit the button.
I like that.
And I kind of believe that.
I do too.
But, you know, the fears are interesting. Has anybody who you've had on ever struck a tinge of fear in you just for something they said or did?
No.
I had that one time.
Mm-hmm.
One time that's happened. But other than that, it's pretty good.
Tell me the story.
Well, it was, it's very complicated, but I'll sum it up here. The story was with a gentleman named William Walter. William J. Walter. William Walter was he was running the teletype machine in the New Orleans FBI office in 1963. November
boy.
of 63.
Oh my.
And his story is that he got a teletype 5 days before the Kennedy assassination.
Really?
To watch out for threats against the president, because there were big threats.
Really?
From Lee Harvey Oswald, named in the teletype.
Really?
Yeah, because the story was that Oswald had been in New Orleans, and that's why the teletype came there.
Mm-hmm.
So he turned it into his superior, like he should, and 5 days later, president's murdered.
Right.
He goes back to the superior, says, what about that teletype? The guy says, never talk about it again.
Mm.
So, all these years pass, and I hear this story, and I have him on the air, and we're doing the interview, and we get to the very end of the interview. I had him on for 2 hours. It was so fascinating. We get to the very end, and he read the teletype to me right over the airwaves, because technically it was not illegal to copy down the teletype, but it was illegal to take it.
Right.
So he copied it down back in 63, and he's reading the copy to me, and he had always contended that he wrote it down, and that's why he had this information. Mm-hmm. So we get to the end of the interview, and I say, I don't remember what the question was, but it was something of the nature of, where do you keep this paper? Because you've obviously kept it for 50 years. And he said, well, Scott, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anybody before. I've never revealed this, but I didn't write it down. I took the original copy.
Ooh.
And I have it.
Ooh.
And I said to him, reflex, I said, is that going to be bad for you that you've just said that? He said, well, I expect an FBI man on my door today.
Wow.
And I said, should I be worried? And he said, if I was you, I would be.
Really?
And to me, nothing ended up happening, thank God.
Yeah.
But to me, for a second, I thought...
You were worried.
I thought, well, maybe we've gotten into territory we shouldn't have gotten into.
Right.
But you never know.
Mm-hmm. I have to do something.
Well, this has been fascinating, Art.
Okay, good.
I've enjoyed it.
Nice as it's been, and I've enjoyed it thoroughly. I do have to wind it up, Scott.
Well, thank you, Art, for coming on. I'm glad we were able to do this, and I hope you come back in the future.
Thank you. I'd be happy to.
Take care.
And you did a great job on it, and I thank you ever so much.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Art Hellyer. What a guy he was. What a voice. What a personality. What an idea of what it takes to be on radio and be successful in the broadcast industry. A lot of fun, and I'm sure we'll have Art back in the very near future. But until next time, this is Scott Spears, heading for the dugout.